When the lawyer read my parents' will, my name wasn't even mentioned. Not once. Not in passing, not as an afterthought, not even hidden behind some vague trust to be established later. It was as if I, their only son, had never existed. The silence that followed was the kind that makes your heartbeat sound like gunfire. My sister, Amelia, was sitting across from me, her lips twitching, trying to hide a smile. My parents had always said she had a good head for business. Apparently, that head had just inherited everything they'd ever owned: our family's construction company, the house we grew up in, even my mother's jewelry. Meanwhile, I got nothing. Not the company I helped rebuild after Dad's heart attack. Not the lake house I renovated myself. Not even the damn watch I gave him for his 60th birthday. Nothing. I stared at Mr. Latham, the family lawyer, who avoided eye contact as if I were contagious. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice sharp but shaking. He shuffled papers nervously. The will is quite clear, Ethan. Your parents left their entire estate to your sister. Amelia crossed her legs, smooth and deliberate, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Ethan, please. Let's not make this dramatic, she said, in that calm, patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. You've always done your own thing. Mom and Dad probably just thought. Thought what? I snapped. That I didn't need a damn thing from them. Her silence was answer enough. The car ride home was a blur of headlights and rain. My parents' mansion loomed ahead, a house that used to feel like home but now looked like a museum filled with ghosts. I pulled into the driveway out of habit, even though I had no reason to anymore. Inside, Amelia was already there. She'd beaten me back somehow. Of course she had. She was always one step ahead. She was standing in the study, sipping from one of Dad's crystal tumblers. The firelight flickered over the shelves of old ledgers and family photos. You shouldn't be here, she said without turning around. Neither should you, I said. This house belongs to both of us. It belonged to our parents, she interrupted smoothly. And now, legally, to me. Her words hit harder than I expected. She didn't even sound cruel, just final. I wanted to yell, to demand an explanation, but what would it change? I knew my parents. They were old school, stubborn to the bone. Once they made a decision, it was carved in stone. Still, it didn't make sense. My mother had promised me I'd take over the company one day. I'd worked alongside my father for years, learning every part of the business while Amelia was off getting her MBA and pretending to be too good for manual labor. And yet somehow, in the end, she got it all. Later that night, I wandered into Dad's office. The room smelled like leather, sawdust, and whiskey. I ran my fingers along the mahogany desk. His throne, really. That's where he'd sat me down at 16 and told me, if you want something in this world, build it yourself. Maybe that was what he meant to teach me by cutting me out. Maybe this was his final lesson. But if it was a cruel one. I noticed something strange then. The desk drawer on the left, always locked, was slightly open. Inside was a folder labeled EC Holdings. My initials. Heart pounding, I flipped through the papers. Business plans. Schematics. Bank drafts. All signed by him. It looked like my father had started something under my name, a company, maybe, but never told me. Why? What was he hiding? Before I could dig deeper, I heard footsteps. Amelia appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Looking for something, she asked softly. I froze, the folder half open in my hand. You knew about this? Her lips curved slightly. Of course I did. The firelight behind her flickered, and for a split second, I saw it, something cold and calculating in her eyes. She stepped closer, took the folder from my hand, and smiled. Dad said you'd find this eventually. Guess he was right. What is this, Amelia? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. She just smiled wider. Nothing you need to worry about, little brother. And then she left calm, composed, like a queen leaving her court. I stood there, staring at the empty doorway, the words echoing in my head. Nothing you need to worry about. But the unease in my chest told me otherwise. Something about my father's death, the will, and that mysterious folder didn't add up. And deep down, I knew I wasn't just cut out of their fortune. I was set up. 3 weeks after the will reading, I still woke up angry. Some mornings, it hit me before I even opened my eyes, the image of my father sitting in his leather chair, nodding to the lawyer while Amelia looked on like a saint accepting her blessing. I'd roll over, stare at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, and remind myself that it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. They'd chosen her. Still, the folder I found that night E.C. Holdings wouldn't leave my mind. Amelia had taken it from me, saying it was nothing to worry about. But my gut told me that folder was the reason I was cut out. And if Amelia knew what it really was, she wasn't saying. The first red flag came during a company board meeting I wasn't supposed to attend. I still knew half the staff at Caldwell Construction, and one of the site managers, an old friend named Ray, tipped me off. Amelia's changing everything, he said over the phone, voice low. She's moving funds around, cutting deals behind closed doors. It's not sitting right with the crew. I showed up early, sitting in the back corner of the boardroom. Amelia didn't notice me until halfway through her presentation. She froze for a fraction of a second, then smiled like a politician. Ethan, she said, you're not an employee anymore. What are you doing here? I'm still family, I said, leaning forward. I just want to see how you're running our company. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It's my company now. The meeting went on, but something was off. Amelia spoke in polished, rehearsed sentences about streamlining operations and restructuring assets. Yet when someone asked where the new funding was coming from, she brushed it aside. Private investors, she said quickly. Investors? Caldwell Construction never needed investors. We were self-funded for years. When the meeting ended, she pulled me aside, her voice low but sharp. You need to stop showing up like this. You're making people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? I scoffed. Or suspicious? Her jaw tightened. Dad trusted me to keep this company alive. If you really respected him, you'd let me do that. She turned and walked away before I could answer. That's when I noticed her phone lighting up with an incoming call. The name on the screen read, EC Holdings. My initials. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started digging. The first thing I found was that EC Holdings had been registered 6 months before my father's death. The listed address? A P.O. box tied to Caldwell Construction. The owner on record? Amelia Caldwell. Not me. Not my father. Her. I started to wonder if my father even knew. Or if she had used his illness to quietly build something behind his back, something in my name. Every discovery made me sicker to my stomach. One night, I drove by the old family home. The lights were on in the study, Dad's office. Amelia was there, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. Through the window, I could barely make out her voice. No, he suspects something. We'll move forward as planned. My chest tightened. She paused, listening. Then, quieter. Yes, EC Holdings is secure. No one else knows. I couldn't hear the rest. A car passed, its headlights flashing over the glass, and she looked up suddenly. I ducked back behind a tree, heart pounding. After a moment, the light went out. I should have gone home, but I stayed there for almost an hour, trying to make sense of it all. The way she had smiled at me during the will reading. The way she'd brushed off the folder. The way my father had started acting distant in the months before his death, always taking phone calls in private, locking his study, insisting I focus on my own projects. Had Amelia gotten to him? Manipulated him somehow? Or was I just losing my mind, trying to find a reason why my own parents had erased me from their legacy? The next morning, Ray called again. "Ethan, something's weird," he said. "We got a notice this morning half the company's assets have been transferred to a new partner." "What partner?" E.C. Holdings. The room spun. "That's impossible." "It's happening, man. Payroll's frozen. The workers are pissed." I thanked him and hung up, staring at my reflection in the dark computer screen. It all lined up: the secrecy, the new investors, the phone calls, the missing folder. Amelia wasn't just managing the company. She was gutting it. But for what? That night, I found myself back at Dad's grave. The marble was cold under my fingers, the carved letters sharp in the moonlight. "Why'd you do it, old man?" I whispered. "Why leave everything to her?" The wind rustled through the trees, and for a second, I could almost hear his voice again, steady, commanding, full of that unshakable certainty. "If you want something in this world, build it yourself." Maybe that was the answer. Maybe I didn't need their will, or their company, or Amelia's permission. Maybe it was time I built my own fortune, starting with the truth about EC Holdings. But as I turned to leave, a shadow moved near the trees. A tall figure, watching me. When I called out, they disappeared into the darkness. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. Someone was making sure I never found out what my family had really done. I found out the truth on a Thursday. It started with a message from Ray. "You might want to see this. Not safe to talk here." He sent an address: an old warehouse on the south side of town, near the docks. The kind of place our company used to rent for equipment storage. I drove there before I could talk myself out of it. The building looked abandoned, its steel doors rusted and tagged with graffiti. But inside, the lights were on and rows of new construction vehicles gleamed like gold. All of them bore a fresh logo, EC Holdings. My logo. My name. And next to one of the trucks stood Amelia. She was talking to a man in a tailored suit I didn't recognize. His back was to me, but his posture screamed money and control. Amelia looked different. Polished. Confident. Powerful. I ducked behind a stack of steel beams and listened. "Transfer's almost complete," the man said. "Once the last payment clears, Caldwell Construction is fully absorbed." Amelia smiled. "Good. The workers won't even know it's happened until the contracts renew." "Your brother, Ethan," she said, almost laughing. "He's out of the picture. Legally, EC Holdings is mine now. Even the paperwork under his initials leads back to me." My blood went cold. She had used my initials E.C. to make it look like my father had founded the company for me. But in reality, she'd twisted it, registering everything under her control while he was dying. And my parents had believed it. That was the final piece. When Dad got sick, he'd started talking about preparing for the future. He'd trusted Amelia to handle the paperwork, to help set things up for both of us. She must have convinced him that I was already taken care of, that EC Holdings was my business, my shot at independence. He must have thought he was helping me. Instead, Amelia turned it into her weapon. I stepped out from behind the beams. "You lying snake!" Amelia froze, her face paling for just a second before she smoothed it over with that practiced smile. "Ethan," she said lightly. "You shouldn't be here." The man in the suit turned around. He was younger than I expected, late 30s, maybe, and he smiled like someone who'd already won. "Mr. Caldwell," he said. "I assume you've heard of me. Daniel Holt. I represent the investors behind EC Holdings." "Investors?" I spat. You mean thieves? Daniel raised a brow. Big words for someone who doesn't even own his family company. I ignored him and stepped closer to Amelia. You used Dad's trust against him. You forged everything, his signatures, the filings, the transfers. You made it look like EC Holdings was mine so he'd cut me out of the will. Her eyes flickered. Just for a heartbeat. Then she said softly, you were never supposed to find out. That broke something inside me. You know what's funny? I said, my voice trembling. Dad used to say you were the smart one. The perfect one. But you were always jealous. You couldn't stand that he relied on me more. Amelia's expression hardened. He relied on you because he pitied you. You were the handyman, Ethan the good little worker. But when it came to real leadership, he chose me. You stole his choice. I earned it, she said coldly. You think running a business is about loyalty? It's about survival. You never would have made the hard calls. I did. Hard calls. I laughed bitterly. You manipulated a dying man and erased your own brother from his legacy. She didn't flinch. I did what I had to. Daniel stepped in, his tone too casual. This conversation's over. Amelia, we have a meeting downtown. Mr. Caldwell, if you value your safety, I'd suggest you stop playing detective. They left together, their car tires screeching out of the warehouse lot. I stood there among the machines, every one of them built with my sweat, my designs, my late nights. And all of it stolen. The weight of betrayal hit like a gut punch. I slammed my fist against one of the trucks until my knuckles bled. The echo rang out, sharp and hollow. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. But under the heartbreak, under the rage, something else began to stir. Resolve. That night, I went through my father's old email archives, years of messages I'd copied before losing access to the company server. And buried deep in an encrypted folder, I found a trail, emails between Dad and a man named Holt, the same Daniel from the warehouse. The early messages were about expansion, partnerships, new funding. Then the tone shifted. Dad started asking questions, demanding accountability. And the last email, sent 2 weeks before his death, was short and chilling. Amelia, we need to talk about Daniel. Something isn't right. No reply. 2 days later, my father was in the hospital. 4 days after that, he was gone. And Amelia had already filed the final transfer paperwork. I sat in the dark, the glow of the computer screen painting everything in cold blue. It wasn't just greed. It was murderous ambition. My father hadn't just trusted the wrong person, he'd died right as she secured everything in her name. And now I had proof she'd done it all under the company built from his life's work. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at the city skyline. Amelia thought she'd won. But she forgot the one thing Dad always said, if you want something in this world, build it yourself. And I was about to build something she could never steal, her downfall. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amelia's face in that warehouse, calm, cold, unshaken as she erased me from everything my family had ever built. For days, I drifted between fury and despair. I'd stare at the mirror and barely recognize the man looking back. Unshaven. Exhausted. Hollow. I'd lost my parents, my inheritance, my company, and now, I realized, even my past. Amelia had rewritten it all, like I'd never mattered. But grief, when it burns long enough, turns into something sharper. Resolve. The moment it happened, the shift from broken to determined came unexpectedly. I was cleaning out the few boxes I'd saved from my father's office, the ones Amelia hadn't bothered to take. Most of it was old paperwork, invoices, and photos. Then I found something I hadn't noticed before, a small, leather-bound notebook tucked inside one of his old project ledgers. Inside were his personal notes, sketches, reminders, half-finished quotes. But on the very last page, written in his distinct, blocky handwriting, were 6 words that stopped my breath. Legacy isn't given. It's proven. Below it was a name E.C. Holdings and one line underlined twice. For Ethan when he's ready. My throat tightened. He did mean it for me. The company, the initials, the future dad had built it as a test, maybe even a gift. And Amelia had stolen it before I ever got the chance to understand. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming what he intended for me to become. That was the moment the fog lifted. I wasn't a victim. Not anymore. I called Ray the next morning. He answered on the first ring, voice low. You okay, man? No, I said. But I'm done being silent. Ray hesitated. You're going after her, aren't you? Not just her. Everyone who helped her. He let out a slow whistle. Then you're gonna need more than anger. I've got something better, I said. A plan. Over the next week, I buried myself in research. I traced every transaction Amelia had made through EC Holdings, every subcontractor, every transfer, every shell company Daniel Holt used to funnel funds. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Amelia wasn't just laundering my father's company into her own. She was stripping it for parts, liquidating assets under the radar while keeping the brand alive just long enough to hide it. But she'd made one mistake. One of the shell companies she used, Horizon Materials Limited, had been registered under a dummy director who no longer existed. Literally. The listed man had died 3 years before the company was formed. It was fraud. Paperwork level, traceable, and provable. And with it, I finally had something I could use. Still, I couldn't just take her to court. She'd buried herself behind layers of legal armor and connections. If I wanted justice, I had to fight her the way she fought me, quietly, strategically, from the ground up. That's when the idea hit me. If Amelia had stolen my future, I'd build a new one. From scratch. A company built on my name, my rules, and my integrity. One that would rise so fast, it would bury hers in the process. I would build a better Caldwell construction. Not a revival. A rebirth. And I knew exactly what to call it: Phoenix Developments. Ray came on board first. He'd been with our father since the beginning and knew every contractor worth trusting. Then came Leela, a finance consultant who'd left Caldwell after Amelia's restructuring. When she heard what Amelia had done, she didn't hesitate. I'm in, she said. That woman made me fire 20 good people for no reason. Let's take her down. We started small, just a handful of people working out of my apartment. But the energy was different this time. Every blueprint, every phone call, every late-night strategy session, it all felt earned. For the first time since the will reading, I felt alive again. One evening, after another long day, I found myself staring at my father's notebook again. His handwriting looked almost alive in the lamplight. I traced the words with my finger. Legacy isn't given. It's proven. And I realized something else. Maybe he'd known this would happen. Maybe he'd wanted to see if I could stand on my own, to prove I was more than just his son or Amelia's shadow. If so, then this was my trial. And I intended to pass. Weeks turned into months. Phoenix Developments began to grow. We won our first small project, then another. I started reaching out to old clients Amelia had driven away. Many of them didn't hesitate to switch sides once they heard my name. Your father would be proud, one of them told me. I wanted to believe that. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Amelia wouldn't let this stand forever. Sure enough, the first warning came in the form of a letter, sealed, expensive paper, no return address. Inside, a single sentence written in Amelia's handwriting. You're not ready, Ethan. Stop before you lose more than money. For a moment, I just stared at it. The old me might have crumbled under that threat. But not now. Now, I smiled. Because if Amelia was worried enough to warn me, it meant she was finally starting to feel what I'd felt all along. Fear. Revenge, I learned, wasn't a single blow. It was an operation, patient, surgical, and ugly. It required maps and mirrors, patience and poison, and a small army willing to do the boring, relentless work. I started by drawing a map. On my kitchen table I taped printouts, corporate filings, bank statements, emails, and photocopies of the forged signatures I'd pulled from the archives. Lines of red string connected shell companies to offshore accounts, Daniel Holt to Horizon Materials, and Horizon to the mysterious P.O. boxes Amelia used. It looked like the wiring diagram for an explosion. The goal was simple: trace every cent that had left Caldwell and prove the direction it had been pulled. Step 1. Gather incontrovertible proof. Leela ran the forensic accounting. She slept 2 nights at a time, surfacing in my living room with printouts that made my head swim. "Look here," she said one morning, pointing at a cluster of transactions. "Horizon paid vendors that don't exist. The invoices are templated. They were created the day before the funds moved." She traced IP addresses, timestamp anomalies, and payment patterns that matched Daniel Holt's travel schedule. Layer by layer, the paper trail turned from messy to damning. Ray handled field work. He walked the sites Amelia claimed were outsourced and took photos. He interviewed foremen and subcontractors who admitted they'd been paid less, or not at all. Some were scared to talk, others were hungry for any chance to stick it to her. Ray promised anonymity and made them feel valuable. Their statements, recorded and notarized, became the human backbone of our case. Step 2. Create the mirror. If Amelia had used my name as cover, I'd use mirrors to reflect her own methods back at her. We staged a string of small, controlled bids through Phoenix developments designed to provoke a response. I wanted to see how she moved, who she called, which shell companies she activated, and how quickly she tried to smother competition. Each call she made left a trace. Each hurried transfer she initiated left a pattern. We documented it. We also planted a decoy, a fake project proposal for a mid-size municipal contract, deliberately leaked to channels Amelia monitored. The aim wasn't to win the bid but to make her show her hand. She did. Within 48 hours, Horizon Materials pinged a vendor, and Daniel Holt flew in on a private jet to meet contractors. We had timestamps and surveillance photos. Small victories, but necessary. Step 3. Legal scaffolding. Leela introduced me to a boutique law firm that specialized in corporate fraud. They were scrappy, willing to work on contingency, and their lead attorney, Maris, smelled strategy. "Paper trails are good," she said, flipping through our dossier. "But you need an anchor, something unequivocal. Forged signatures are that anchor, but you'll also need to connect them to payments and intent." She filed for subpoenas, emergency injunctions, and asked for preservation orders on servers tied to Horizon and EC Holdings. The law moved slower than I wanted, but it moved in the right direction. Step 4. Recruit a whistleblower. This was the hardest part. Inside Amelia's inner circle, people feared her temper, her reach, her habit of quietly ruining careers. But everyone has a breaking point. We found one in Marco, an accounts clerk who'd been moved around by Amelia like a chess piece. He'd been paid in cash, told to shred paper, and once threatened with legal retaliation. Leela promised protection. Ray promised an honest job with Phoenix. Marco gave us raw access to a folder on a laptop, internal memos, a scanned copy of a meeting note mentioning forged filings, a list of vendors who'd been redirected to Horizon. He agreed to meet Maris and sign a sworn affidavit. Every addition made our case heavier. Every affidavit tightened the noose. But with each gain, Amelia pushed back harder. She froze payments to Phoenix bids through industry pressure. A contractor we'd counted on pulled out after receiving a veiled legal notice. And somewhere in the background, Daniel Holt used his network to whisper doubt into investors' ears. The villain still looked in control. She sent another letter, less polite this time, threatening litigation and reckless defamation. A delivery arrived, a terse voicemail recording of an unnamed caller implying I was destabilizing the company while grieving our father. It was meant to cow me. Instead, it sharpened my focus. Threats were an admission that she felt vulnerable. Step 5. Set the trap. Our plan hinged on timing. Maris had obtained a preservation order for the servers tied to Horizon and EC Holdings. We coordinated a simultaneous legal motion and a public reveal, an expose pitched to a local investigative journalist who owed Maris a favor. The journalist wanted docs, signed affidavits, bank trails, vendor testimonies, and a smoking gun, the forged filing with my father's signature that tied Amelia to the theft. We assembled everything into a neat, unavoidable package. On the night before filing, I stood on the roof of Phoenix's tiny office and watched Amelia's building across the river lit like a fortress. She looked untouchable. Daniel Holt's car glinted in the lot. I imagined the next day's headlines and the damage they would do, but I also imagined the empty room of my old life and the faces of the workers she'd discarded. I thought of my father's notebook: legacy isn't given. It's proven. This was the proving. But just before dawn, as I was about to sleep for the first time in weeks, Ray burst in, breathless. "They've moved something," he panted. "Holt's taken servers offline, off-site backup. He's covering tracks." My stomach dropped. We had a preservation order. If they were erasing backups, they were desperate, and that meant they might burn evidence. The trap was set. But traps are risky. Sprung too early, they fail. Dragged out too long, the target escapes. I felt every second like a wire under my skin. Amelia still acted like the queen of the boardroom. Holt still smiled like a man without consequence. And tomorrow, the world would begin to choose. Rain pounded against the courthouse windows like drums of war. I stood in the marble lobby of the city courthouse, suit pressed but collar tight, my hands trembling around a folder that held 3 years of my family's buried sins. Today was the day. Today, Amelia Caldwell, the woman who stole our inheritance, forged our father's will, and erased my name from our legacy, would face everything she'd built collapsing on top of her. And the best part? She didn't even know it yet. The hearing was supposed to be a routine proceeding, a civil motion involving corporate restructuring between Caldwell Construction and EC Holdings. But thanks to Maris, our attorney, it had quietly become something much bigger, a full judicial review, with the media invited under public transparency. By 9 a.m., reporters were already lining the steps outside. Cameras clicked. Microphones bristled like spears. Inside, Amelia walked in first, draped in her tailored grey suit, chin high, smile calm and confident. Daniel Holt followed, whispering in her ear. The two looked untouchable, radiant, even like royalty striding into a coronation. When her eyes met mine, she smirked. "Still playing dress up, little brother?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And truth has a way of burning through silk and stone. The judge entered, and the courtroom rose. The formalities blurred until it was Maris's voice I heard, steady, sharp, and merciless. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is about a stolen legacy. About documents forged, companies gutted, and a family name exploited for personal gain. We will present evidence that Amelia Caldwell and her associate Daniel Holt deliberately falsified financial records, laundered company assets, and used fraudulent shell corporations to seize control of Caldwell Construction from its rightful successor, Ethan Caldwell." A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras clicked faster. Amelia's smirk faltered just slightly. One by one, Maris presented our traps. Emails with altered timestamps. Bank transfers routed through EC Holdings. Photocopies of my father's signature, each a perfect replica except for one fatal mistake: the notary seal on the witnessed documents was filed 3 days after my father's death. Then came the witness testimonies. Ray took the stand first. His voice cracked when he described the weeks after our father's death, the confusion, the locked files, the orders from Amelia to burn anything without a current date. Then came Marco, the whistleblower accountant. He testified how Daniel Holt had directed him to falsify ledgers to make Ethan appear financially unstable before the will was finalized. Every word landed like a hammer. Amelia leaned toward Holt, whispering urgently. Her mask was cracking. Then Maris dropped the bombshell, a hard drive handed to the bailiff, labeled Horizon Server Backup Confidential. The drive had been one of the backups Holt tried to erase. We'd gotten to it first. On screen, the projector flashed an email chain Holt to Amelia. Your father's condition is deteriorating. You must have him sign before next week. Once done, EC will own the holdings in full. Ethan's name will appear for optics, but it'll all trace back to you. The courtroom went dead silent. Then, another file, an internal memo written by Amelia herself, scheduling estate transition filings 2 days before our father's official date of death. Even the judge leaned back, eyebrows raised. Miss Caldwell, he said slowly, are you prepared to explain these documents? Amelia swallowed, visibly shaken for the first time. These are fabricated. My brother is. Objection, Maris cut in. We have verified the IP addresses and digital signatures. Both match her devices and her office server. The judge nodded gravely. Overruled. The press exploded in whispers. Cameras flashed like lightning. By the afternoon recess, the world outside the courthouse had changed. Headlines flooded social media. Caldwell heiress accused of fraud and forgery. Family fortune stolen, brother presents explosive evidence. Amelia tried to walk out through the crowd but was met with a storm of questions. Did you fake your father's will? Was your brother right? Are you going to prison? She snapped, no comment. But her voice cracked. The cameras caught it. The Queen was crumbling. Inside the courthouse restroom, I stood alone at the sink, breathing hard. My reflection looked calmer than I felt. I should have been elated, but instead, I felt a quiet, heavy peace. Dad's words echoed in my mind again, legacy isn't given. It's proven. I looked into the mirror and whispered, I proved it, Dad. When the court reconvened, the judge delivered his interim ruling. All company assets of Caldwell Construction and its subsidiaries are hereby frozen pending full investigation. Control is removed from Miss Caldwell and her affiliates effective immediately. The evidence suggests material fraud, forgery, and intentional misrepresentation. This court authorizes the opening of a criminal inquiry. Amelia's jaw dropped. Holt's face drained of color. The cameras caught every second. For the first time, Amelia looked small. She turned toward me, eyes blazing. You think this makes you the hero, she hissed. You destroyed the family name. No, I said quietly. You did. I just set the record straight. Security escorted her out as reporters shouted questions. Holt tried to leave through a side door but was intercepted by investigators holding a warrant. The empire she built on lies was collapsing brick by stolen brick. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was bruised purple and gold, the kind of color that comes after a storm has spent its fury. Leela and Ray joined me on the courthouse steps, the noise of the crowd fading behind us. What happens now? Ray asked. I looked out at the skyline, the city my father built, the company that bore our name, and the future I was finally free to claim. Now, I said. Now I build what should have been ours. But this time, no one gets left out. And as the cameras flashed again, I realized the revenge was never just about payback. It was about restoration. I hadn't just taken my sister down. I'd taken my name back. It's strange how quiet life becomes after the noise fades. A month ago, the courthouse was a battlefield, cameras flashing, names dragged through mud, my sister's empire burning down in real time. Now, the world has moved on. Headlines change fast. But the scars they leave behind? Those take their time. For Amelia, that silence must feel like suffocation. For me it finally feels like peace. The morning after the final ruling, I woke up in my father's old house. The same one Amelia tried to sell without a word. Dust floated in the sunlight streaming through the cracked blinds. I found Dad's old watch on the windowsill, still ticking, still steady. That sound used to haunt me after he died. Now, it reminded me of why I fought. Because he'd built everything with calloused hands and restless nights. He'd earned it. And she'd stolen it. But what I'd built, this was mine. Amelia's downfall spread fast. The court froze all her assets. Caldwell Construction was placed under external administration. Investigations confirmed every piece of evidence, the forged will, the money siphoned into shell companies, even the secret accounts she and Daniel Holt had tucked away overseas. Holt was arrested 2 weeks later on charges of fraud and conspiracy. Amelia wasn't far behind. I watched the footage online, a surreal clip of my sister in handcuffs, head down, hair disheveled, being led past the same reporters she once smiled for. The comments section lit up like fireworks. Karma hit hard. She thought she was untouchable. That brother deserves everything she stole. I didn't smile. Not right away. Because revenge isn't fireworks, it's an echo. It hits, then fades, leaving you standing there wondering what's next. 3 months later, the board of Caldwell Construction approached me. They offered me the CEO position temporarily, they said, until the company stabilizes. I accepted. But not to rebuild her empire. To rebuild ours. I brought back the old hands Dad trusted, the ones she'd fired for not fitting the new image. I reopened our original workshop downtown. The place smelled like sawdust and oil, just like when I was a kid. We started a new division, Caldwell Legacy, focused on affordable homes and eco-housing. The kind of thing Dad always dreamed of doing before profits consumed the family business. Within 6 months, we were back in the black. Investors returned. Clients followed. The company she tried to twist into a monument for her ego became something honest again. Something real. But justice didn't stop at the courtroom. Amelia tried to reach out once from county jail. A letter, written in looping cursive, begging for forgiveness. She said she'd made mistakes, that Dad would have wanted family to stay united. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it, placed it inside Dad's watch box, and locked it away. Forgiveness isn't weakness, but it's something you earn. She hadn't earned it. Months later, I stood on stage at the reopening ceremony for Caldwell Construction. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and our new logo gleamed behind me, Caldwell Legacy, built with integrity. Leela was there, smiling proudly. Ray too, hands still rough from the tools he refused to put down even after promotion. When I took the mic, I didn't talk about lawsuits or revenge. I talked about second chances. About family meaning more than blood, it's about values. About how losing everything gave me the chance to build something that couldn't be stolen. When I finished, there was silence. Then applause, loud, thunderous, real. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd finally stepped out of someone else's shadow. Later that night, I walked alone through the nearly finished model home, our first Caldwell Legacy project. Simple, warm, and full of light. The air smelled faintly of pine and paint. I stood in the doorway, imagining Dad there, arms crossed, nodding that slow approving nod of his. "You did good, kid," I could almost hear him say. And for once, I believed it. Because I hadn't inherited anything, not wealth, not reputation, not love. I'd earned all of it back with grit and truth. And that's a fortune no one can steal. Before I left, I turned off the lights and whispered to the empty room. You left me out of your will, Amelia. But I made something better. A legacy you'll never be part of. That's poetic justice. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who thought they could erase you, remember this: the best revenge isn't payback. It's proving you never needed their permission to rise. Would you have fought back like I did, or walked away? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if you want more stories of betrayal, justice, and redemption, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes, the only thing more powerful than karma is the person who learns how to build it.